landscape of web animation has changed so much over the past 20 years. At one point, it was websites like Newgrounds or Albino Black Sheep where Flash animations were hosted and observed by an enthusiastic community. Naturally, YouTube became the next step, giving creators more options for growth socially and financially. The conditions in which web animations have been privy to affect how we interface with them, and in turn, how we look at their creators. It feels weird and a bit terrifying to say that we can look back in retrospect on web animators like OniNG, the subject of this video. It's been long enough for us to gain a new perspective and see how his creations may have influenced others. All that being said, it might be odd to say any of this considering Chris's career may have not even hit its peak yet. Even calling it a retrospective feels weird. How do we do a retrospective for something like this? In this video, I'm going to go over many pivotal animations in Chris's career and construct a timeline with his progression. Please keep in mind that this is not from the perspective of an animator, well, not a competent one at least, and some information that is corroborated here may not be right, as some of it may be speculation depending on the circumstances. This video will not do long-winded critique of these animations, but I plan to go over some of the effect that Oni has on web animation culture. I'll be covering some of his animations more than others, so bear in mind that I may not have something insightful to say for every single video covered here. But for posterity, I'm going to try and cover all of them. For Flash December 2022, I'm going to go over some of Chris's earliest animations rapidly. There's no sense in spending too much time on them. Yeah. These animations were made in 2006 and 2007 respectively, putting Oni at around 15 or 16 years old, so keep that in mind. Oni's first public animation is Halo Combat Erected. Video game parodies are the most popular thing at the time, so it would make sense that a game like Halo would be funny to parody. It's very antiquated, and it's a product of its time. Chris even states in the description that Newgrounds wouldn't let him delete it, and we shouldn't watch it. Well, I'm calling attention to it because it's the best type of cringe humor. The Random Day series is just a bunch of stupid bullshit, a la stick figures on crack. Probably Chris just messing around with tools and figuring stuff out. Fun little stick figures beat the hell out of each other and other senseless violence seems to be the most of these little vignettes. All except for number 4. Random Day number 4 is like 10 minutes long, which is just nuts. Birds and the Bees is, well, whatever the hell this is supposed to be. Cool looking parrot. God of War 2 theme is just an animation basically, with drawn assets. It does the misheard lyric stints and has funny little drawings next to it. It's cute for what it is. Hardware Store, or Weird Al's Best, which is what it was renamed to get Oni more views on Newgrounds. There's a lot of effort put into this one, but Oni seems to not like it now.
I remember when it got posted. People watched it when it got posted.
Have you noticed that it's like one of the only cartoons I didn't upload to my main page?
I wonder why that is.
It's probably because it's disgustingly shit.
Fuck Oni for not liking it and making fun of it now. If this was in my early catalog, I'd be proud to have it. But, you know, hey, there's an email in the corner here. Let's send Chris a message about it. Scotty and Pete features more animation than Oni's usual fare, but god, it sucks. It's the most loud and obnoxious thing ever. It does have Tom Fulp dying, so that's a good thing. SpongeBob No Pants feels like a rejected Random Day skit. That's all I have to say on it. It's just him fucking around. Disturb Johnny as a cartoon is more of a concerted effort like Weird Al's Best, but it might potentially be the most edgy thing Oni has ever done. This is actual trash, and Oni would have a good reason to cringe at it now, unlike Weird Al's Best. Yeah, I'm gonna be holding that to him. Apparently, he went by Oni Sephiroth at one point on the internet, which is extremely funny. Yeah! Egoraptor's awesome series captured the imagination of many creators on Newgrounds, Oni being one of them. In one of his earliest popular animations, Oni takes on Grand Theft Auto 4 in Egoraptor's format. While Oni's trademark humor isn't entirely present here, the frenetic energy starts to take shape. It's clear that Oni was emulating Egoraptor. so not seeing much of his style here is understandable. A smart design choice that isn't just used by Oni is making the eyes completely white. One, you don't have to go through the rigorous process of animating pupils, potentially making character expression easier. It's sort of like how Hanna-Barbera gave Yogi Bear a collar so they wouldn't have to animate the whole body moving to look in different directions. Even though Oni would hone his craft enough to make his characters extremely expressive, this video demonstrates his resourcefulness when animating. Yeah! The Awesome series and Chris's parodies made way for the Sixins, the first of only 2 videos in his 6 series. This is where Chris's more macabre sense of humor starts to manifest.
I want the hug. Shut the fuck up, you little bitch!
Bart Ripe's Millhouse. Lisa is a Lovecraftian nightmare. Horrifying violence. The pieces are just all here. Animation chops aren't quite there yet, since we can tell that most of these are just traced. I will give credit where it's due, the mouth-syncing animations are good. It doesn't really matter the quality of the animation at this point, considering Chris was 16 or 17 when he made this in Grand Theft Awesome. That counts for something in 2008. This generation has it easier when it comes to learning animation. There's a ton of tutorials and software is easier now. Back then, you really had to hunker down and be self-taught to get to this level. If it wasn't evident at this point, Oni was proving to not just be talented, but very resourceful and disciplined. And we're gonna start to see that more in his future animations here. Yeah! The next iteration of his short-lived 6 series comes in the format of a SpongeBob parody, with random violent results. Outside of the blatantly edgy humor of this one, the shading and characters are way more competently drawn. Patrick's character is just a weird still with a moving mouth, while SpongeBob is more dynamic. The fluidity of the animation improves greatly here as well. What's interesting is that this animation came out less than a month from the Sixins. The gap in quality is apparent, as SpongeBob's Sick Pants has movements in the characters. Yeah! Back in 2008 and 2009, there was a song called The Assumption Song by the Arrogant Worms, and it was everywhere. And this particular animation from Oni got shared everywhere. It doesn't showcase most of his talents unlike his previous animations, but this may have increased his popularity exponentially. If anything, it was a fun little exercise. There were many animated adaptations of the song, sort of like Perry Grip's I Don't Got No iPhone. Yeah! This is where Chris really started to stretch his legs. Chris and Harry was a collaborative effort with another talented creator, Harry Partridge. You might have heard of him. This animation features both of them duking it out DBZ style. Chris really improved his craft here. The action choreography, visual effects, and backgrounds all look great, especially with the sense of speed that he tries to emulate from Dragon Ball. It's a bit more tame than his previous videos, but this is where his humor started to change from adolescent edginess to mild edginess. Yeah! Unlike Grand Theft Awesome or the 6 series, this was Oni's more notable attempt to incorporate his frenetic and violent humor into a video game parody. The production values continue to skyrocket with more complex animation. Chris added pupils to the eyes, and the animation is much more well-refined. More than Oni's evolution as an artist, his edgy humor that he was known for was climbing faster towards a peak. Brutal violence, racist caricatures, vomiting, this? Yeah, it's 2009 Newgrounds, baby. I'm fucking coming. Left 4 Speed's success would afford it its sequel later on. Chris was getting tighter with his animation chops, and it's beginning to show here. Yeah! If you were an animator or a different creator back then, you were sure to make fun of Fred in some form of media. Some of us really hated his content and wanted to see him suffer. In fact, I had a failed assassination attempt on his life, but even that couldn't have been as unnecessarily brutal as this video. The contempt in this video is so palpable. Everyone hated this squeaky blonde pretty boy. Oni was a very edgy dude back in the day, and this tiny macabre part of my brain cheers when I see this. Seeing the tone shift from Fred yelling his nonsense to the final moments of his animated counterpart's life is so jarring that I find it funny even in 2023. It's mostly funny in part to how much of a product of the time this was. I don't fault Chris for taking out the proverbial gun to take a shot at Fred. Seeing him at the top of the subscribers list back in the day irritated creators and viewers alike. Yeah. Both Left 4 Speed 2 and Left 4 Dead 2 came out within a year of each other. What isn't weird is that both of them are vast improvements over the first one. More content, more zombies, less racist caricatures, and more importantly, more memes. Left 4 Dead 2 might be one of the first OniNG animations that generated an insane amount of memes, just like the games. Left 4 Speed 2 improved in the lip syncing and posing areas, which had to come from getting somebody like Sean Chiplock to do the voices for your animations. Since Sean Chiplock became a professional voice actor, I finally get to make this joke.
That is the scariest fucking thing I have ever seen in my entire life.
This is a last-minute addition to this segment, but somebody went out of their way to make a remake of Left 4 Speed 2 in Source Filmmaker with the original character models from Left 4 Dead 2. And I think that in and of itself is commendable on the creator's part, but also on Oni's part for being able to make something that would be able to be, I guess transmutated would be the word here to use. I know this actually kind of happens a lot now where people remake things in Source Filmmaker or like reanimate them, but this actually happened in 2013. This is a pretty early case of this happening, so this is more of a testament to Oni's influence as an animator at the time. Yeah! Learn to Read was a shift in style for Oni. The lines are cleaner, the characters look more on model, and generally feel less amateurish. Learn to Read, more than anything, seems like a beta test for Leo and Satan. The kid looks suspiciously like Leo, and the Tom Fulp-looking asshole eventually grows a satanic head to kill and eat the kid, which is similar to a gag in Algebra Inversion. Speaking of which, let's finally get to Leo and Satan. Yeah! This is the start of Leo and Satan, one of Oni's most well-known and revered cartoon series. While previous animations in this catalog can be seen as serious attempts at honing his craft, this is where Oni started to really take his animation career seriously. Even though this first installment is only 30 seconds, it would be a brief showcase of his consistent improvement, which would lend him some professional acumen later. This animation is much more limited than his other works, but the lip sync, tweens, and other elements are polished to reflect what an adult animated sitcom would look like on something like Adult Swim. This new efficient workflow allowed Chris and co-creator Sean Keeley to bang out 5 animated shorts for Leo and Satan in the subsequent months. And I'm going to go over each subsequent episode. Yeah! Algebra Inversion quadruples the runtime of the first installment. Pancake Doomsday was a proof of concept and an exercise in the new workflow. So naturally, Algebra Inversion is where Oni would really inject his humor and style. While the characters are still mostly prefabricated assets, Oni does frame-by-frame animation for something like Satan's face. There are only a few moments where a lot of actual movement happen. Oni sought to create a lot by doing as little as possible. Curiously, this animation was made in just 3 days while Oni was busy with college. Oni was more concerned with funnier characters and jokes than he was at showing off his animation skills. This would pay off as Algebra Inversion was a huge success back when it came out. With this new workflow fully tuned, Oni would quickly follow it up with something even bigger. Yeah! It wouldn't take very long for a follow-up. In 2.5 months, Oni released the third installment, Sugar Trip. Oni, not wanting to let a good thing go to waste, upscaled everything about the sequel. With a new and epic intro, Oni really wanted to show that this could potentially be a show with quality that rivaled cartoons on something like Adult Swim. There are some slight improvements in the animation, more dynamic shots, and more going on in the story. The facial animations and actual motion have been significantly upgraded. One thing I haven't really touched on in this animation is the sound and music. Oni has been creating music since 2008, mostly classical type pieces that accompany his animation. The main theme of Leo and Satan really showcases Oni's artistic talent. In just 2 years, he went from composing simple stuff like this to this. Oni had a fanatical obsession to improve at creating art, and it showed. His ambitions and work ethic had to have been emboldened by his peers at the time who were creating at a similar frequency. Other creators in his circle like Psychic Pebbles, Stamper, and Spaz Kid all shared the same space. Newgrounds and YouTube's animation scene was both collaborative and competitive, but when you're around a bunch of like-minded and hardworking people, you tend to really challenge yourself. And this ambition and work ethic would really pay off. Not only were these cartoons beloved at the time, but it would also catch the attention of TV executives. In September 2010, Chris was approached about turning Leo and Satan into a television show. After a few rejected pitches, Leo and Satan caught the attention of animation studio 6 Point Harness, known for their work on the Drawn Together movie, Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey, and curiously enough, the pilot of Smiling Friends. Unfortunately, Leo and Satan would never make it onto any television channel. However, this wouldn't be the first time Chris O'Neill and some peers would attempt to make a show for television, as Hellbenders from both Chris and Zach were also pitched to no avail. Thankfully, Oni would find his way onto television in some form with composing music for Smiling Friends. While Leo and Satan didn't find a home off the internet, it wouldn't be the end with this episode. Yeah. I almost skipped A Convict Christmas since it's very short, but this video is coming out around Christmas or New Year's, so it feels appropriate to cover. Made as an assignment for college, Chris animated a convict cutting a cross into a swastika-laden wrist as a Christmas present for his professor and fellow students. From what I can deduce, it looks like this was made to show how well you can animate lighting. The lighting in this particular cartoon feels very deliberate. Another possible criteria marked on the rubric for this assignment is layer scaling. Two of the main shots have several moving layers, foregrounds, and backgrounds. Either way, this is a great showcase for his abilities, especially if it was under a time constraint. I wonder if he ever got an A on this. I mean, he had to have, right? Yeah. Leo dies in the longest episode of Leo and Satan yet. The same level of quality gets carried over from previous entries here, which results in maybe the best episode of Leo and Satan. The duo find a Ouija board in the trash and decide to play it. During these segments, we see some of the best lighting and shading in the series yet, especially the final shot of the episode with the lights peeking through the curtains. This episode has some of the funniest moments, such as Satan getting irritated at Leo for not asking a demon a question. I believe this is one of Oni's high points in his career. It's personally one of my favorite episodes. Maybe because I had my run-ins with Ouija boards. Mostly me just fucking with other people. Yeah. The penultimate Leo and Satan episode gives us the most ambitious animation yet. The intro, while specific to this video, bridges Trash Hazard and Battery Catastrophe together, and you can tell that there was a lot of passion put into it. Battery Catastrophe has some of the best backgrounds of the series, elevating its production value tenfold. This was assisted by additional supporting artists on the project. Not to mention the amazing music added by Oni. Oni was really refining his musical craft. Not only that, but there are some of Oni's most fluid and detailed animation, especially on Leo's expressions and hair. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's time to cover the final Leo and Satan cartoon. Leo Goes to School. The pace of this cartoon is frenetic and doesn't let up. Keeps up with the other entries in scope and scale, but there's obviously less animation than Sugar Trip. It even forgoes the intro from the previous entries. And upon revisiting it nearly 10 years later and knowing some of what happened behind the scenes, this one feels a bit off to me. The writing isn't as sharp and it doesn't feel rushed. Doing a little digging, I found a post from 2014 on Oni's Facebook that might shed some light on this.
So this has been a post a long time coming. You and said will not be made again.
It seems that the pieces weren't fitting for Oni. Not only did he have a falling out with Sean, but the studio he had work on a pilot didn't do a great job. Combine this with creative fatigue for the project, it was no wonder we never saw Leo and Satan again. Oni felt dejected by how things turned out, but didn't let that discourage him from making cartoons. This last entry is good for what it is, but I can't help but feel the shortcuts and pacing tell the story of someone who wanted to rid their hands of this property. Given the situation, I couldn't blame him. Yeah. After Leo and Satan, Oni's individual work would start to pivot way more into parodies of popular media, starting with Dragon's Ball P. While Leo and Satan was still absurd and wacky, Dragon's Ball P was Oni uncovering the little freak inside him. This cartoon has some of the same workflow of Leo and Satan, opting to use video editing techniques to convey motion more than frame-by-frame animation. This lends to the parody's charm as it reflects the limited animation of anime from that period, especially Dragon Ball's animation. The deliberate oscillations between different frames for the bodies makes the cartoon sillier without having to do much more animation. Oni was more focused on creating the funny faces he would become known for. Leo and Satan showed hints of where he can go with the facial expressions. Dragon's Ball P allows Oni to run fucking wild with it. From this point on, he would make this a trademark of his animations. Parodies of popular franchises were the way to go when animating on YouTube. It was extremely lucrative. Dragon Ball's P is one of Oni's most popular cartoons ever. This would spark a sequel and set him down the path to make cartoon parodies of Harry Potter, which were even more popular. Yeah. Before we even get into those mega hits, let me briefly talk about a 20-second cartoon for way longer than I would need to. This brief little cartoon ruined my dumb high schooler brain. I unfortunately was a cringy loser that would quote this with my dumbass friends. I really hate that I still find this funny now. The disgusting and disjointed face on Shaggy is more evidence of Oni's future direction. There isn't much to this one other than him doing more animated parodies that were encouraged at the time. This is by far Oni's most popular cartoon. Oni goes fucking nuts with the distorted faces and weird mouths on this one, and nearly 60 million people watched and let it happen. 761,000 people encouraged this behavior. 60 million people watched 30 seconds of magical sexual harassment. This is Oni's true legacy and what he'll be actually remembered for. The trademark Oni faces here have more in-between frames and look smoother than anything he's done before. The lip sync has improved exponentially. Another notable improvement or change is the ambient lighting of the backgrounds. Just a pulsating light, but the added bokeh of the background gives the characters in the foreground more of a sharp focus that I think looks clean and professional. Wingardium Leviosa, more than its massive view count, helped cement Oni's fixation on this dumb, distorted face, with the gums showing, hard dimples, and lips puckered. For the next few years, we would see this in almost all of his cartoons, especially the next one. Dragon's Ball PP, with its obvious nomenclature, is the sequel to Dragon's Ball P. The extra P isn't just for show. This cartoon is 3 minutes long with action-packed sequences. Oni stuck with the philosophy of limited anime animation with his stylings, but added his cleanup routine from Wingardium Leviosa to the mix. What resulted is some of Oni's cleanest animation up to that point. There isn't as much boiling onion skin effect for foam motion, the lip sync was extra fluid, and even the animation gags have weight. It just looks more clean and professional. Oni's reliance on distorted character faces is on full display here. Instead of just the puckered face, he would get way more cartoony with it, resulting in one of the most screen-capped faces in web animation history. I knew at least 3 people with his profile picture. It was everywhere. Silly faces would continue to be Oni's modus operandi, and he was delivering classic after classic. This would embolden him to make more in the same vein. Wingardium Leviosa did huge numbers, so it only made sense for Oni to make a follow-up for some sweet, succulent cash. The only thing that the sequel really does is turn up the heat, not in the animation department, but with the magical sexual harassment. There are notable improvements in the motion of the characters, such as the jostling when the characters moved or talked. Oni wanted to make a follow-up to Wingardium Leviosa quick. While this was going on, he was working on more exhaustive cartoons like Hellbenders with Psychic Pebbles. An observation I've made while analyzing all of Oni's parodies from around this time, that being 2010 to 2019, is that Oni had a subtle knack for incorporating the art style of the thing he was parodying rather than to force his own style. So many web animators kept consistent with one art style for consistency, which is great for improving. Oni carefully considers what he's parodying and uses the property style to his advantage. For Final Fantasy VII, the choice to animate the low-poly overworld models as a homage to the original game's graphics elevates the parody, making Oni's appreciation for the property apparent with this conscious decision. Almost a decade later, Oni would do a 3D animated parody of Final Fantasy VII named Snowboard Blues, continuing to adapt the style of the games while being able to animate within his normal parameters, completely mimicking the 3D models from the game. Oni did 2 things in his web animation career: ruin the sense of humor for a bunch of youths in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and brought the creative energy of Newgrounds he was known for to YouTube. Oni was just one of several key Newgrounds animators that carried on the Newgrounds humor, but Oni was one of the few that prominently sat at the top of the burgeoning YouTube animation scene that was being carried over from Newgrounds. While silly faces are just a part of Newgrounds web animation, Oni created some of the most iconic character faces in web animation history. Oni's aptitude for morphing faces into something funny gave everyone a serious case of the giggles. Oni was one of the most popular out of his peers at Sleepy Cabin, mostly in part to his parodies taking off. Oni's absurd humor was a far cry from other video game parodies at the time as well. It didn't try to be clever or sardonic, and it swung hard into being lowbrow. All that being said, I hope you enjoyed this journey into Oni's catalog over the years. Next year, I might cover more of the Sleepy Cabin alumni while covering others outside of the circle in this manner.
We'll be right back.